Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. As you can see, it's just me today, and there's good reason for that. But I wanted to reflect on a bunch of things. I'm kind of doing this without a script today, but I don't know. I've been doing this about 4 years now. I think I could probably wing it. I feel like most of my life, most of the things I do, I'm winging it. But when even when you look at that as a concept, winging it, you never really just sometimes you are completely winging it. Sometimes you are just kind of throwing yourself out there and going, you know what, whatever happens, happens. Let's just see what happens. But a lot of the time, it's kind of like an acknowledgement that you trust yourself, that you trust your ability to be able to get through said thing. So I suppose, like in this instance, I trust my ability to be able to do a maybe 45-minute to an hour long podcast. I don't know. I do have a cheat sheet here. I have some awesome, I was going to say questions, topics, some topics that the wonderful Vilma sent over. So a massive thank you to Vilma. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm, for your support over the years. Couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. And I'm glad that you enjoy the show. And to everyone else who listens to the show, thank you so much for watching, for listening. Um, I love doing the podcast. I've always had kind of mixed feelings over the years as far as what it is, what it represents, what I'm trying to do. I mean, as you know, the goal with the podcast has always been to do what everyone else does, to have like this show with a studio and, a staff and all of that jazz. But at its core, it would always be this. It would always be good topics, good conversations. None of the convoluted stuff, none of the controversy or the silly stuff. That's not to say that we wouldn't ever get controversial or maybe find ourselves in these things because you never know what's going to happen. But I would never go out of my way to seek such things because I just don't get that. I don't like that. I don't like that everything seems to be about just trying to get uh, well, put it like this. If you say that a show is an hour, typically, I feel like a lot of podcasts, they're just kind of looking for that clip that they can use or that series of clips they can use that will help them go viral. And for me, podcasting has never really been about that. Don't get me wrong, I've tried to make my stuff go viral. I've always tried to kind of see what I can do with my content and see how I can push it, how I can market it. And to be honest, I've never really been successful in that endeavor. Maybe I will be in the future, who knows? But I will nevertheless keep trying and I'll do my best. But yeah, it's not happened so far. But I've always been proud of the shows I've done. And to be honest, I don't really take the time to really sit down enough and think about what I've done over the years. I mean, it's been 4 years, 200 and I think it's 72 shows now. And I guess I've found my rhythm. I've found how I go about doing a podcast. And, I'm no longer the newbie. I'm no longer an intermediary. I guess I'm a veteran of podcasting at this point. I mean, most people would have given up by this point. Um, and this is not me trying to be like, oh, I'm better than everyone else. Hey, I get it. Doing a podcast is hard. If you got to like 50 episodes, 100 episodes, congratulations, man. Even if you decided to hang your hat on that, like it takes a lot. I think people often assume that you just, click the camera on, start recording with the microphone, and that's it. That's a show. But it really isn't. This is, like I've always said, this is the easy part. The hard part is putting it all together, piecing it all together, trying to make something interesting, something that people would actually want to listen to, that people would want to watch again and again. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the things that kind of inspired me to do more podcasts and to do more storytelling content and this is a bit random, but I was listening to this the other day and it got me thinking. So there's this podcast that CM Punk did years ago, back in 2014 when he left WWE. Now, for those who don't know, CM Punk is a wrestler, and he's very known for being a very good storyteller, being a very good wordsmith, fantastic on the microphone, right? And there's quite a few of those personalities in the wrestling industry. And whenever you see them either in a wrestling angle or maybe on a panel show of some description, or if they're being interviewed, they're always really, really good storytellers. They always just kind of grab you, they have you in that moment. Like, think about the best story you've ever been told. It probably wasn't even that interesting. It might not have been, it might have been, but it might have just been a very simple story. But what made it special, what made it interesting, what really grabbed you was the way that it was told. And that is the thing that stood out for me about that particular podcast. And there's been many since then, and there's been shoot interviews by wrestlers. I recommend you go check them out, even if you're not a wrestling fan, because they're someone else. They're interesting. But for me, the thing that always stood out was the storytelling element, the just the way that they told stories. And I think for anyone that's followed my content over the years, you've probably seen how I've changed and developed and grown as a storyteller and just as a content creator in general. You go back to the early videos, early live streams, early podcasts, even. And I really wasn't sure how to approach it because I feel like something like that you have to build over time. It's rare that you can just enter a situation from the entertainment perspective and just have charisma, just have natural flair to do these things. Some people have it, some people have to work on it and hone it for many years. And I definitely feel that I fall into that camp because for me, the biggest thing was confidence, being confident in what I do, not worrying about, what people think, like, oh, this is cringe, or oh, this sucks, or oh, what if people think I'm bad at this or that, or whatever. The reality is to get good at these things, you just have to keep doing them and never stop doing them and acknowledge where you need to fix things, where you need to develop things. Over the years, I've realized that from an interview perspective, I've needed to kind of adjust myself according to my guest. So if my guest is really chatty, let them chat, let them talk, but just try to kind of guide that conversation so that it doesn't get too kind of like out of this sphere of what we're supposed to be talking about, or that there's too many tangents. Like I still try and steer it a bit. If it's someone that doesn't talk as much, then I need to talk a bit more. And you might have seen episodes where that's the case, where, I'm trying to bridge the gap. I'm trying to kind of lead the conversation or the narrative we're trying to tell, and do that. I'm not that fussed, to be honest, about my stories being heard anymore on the podcast. I mean, I feel like that's kind of more what Life with Christian Reeve is about, my Patreon show. So for those who aren't aware, I do a Patreon show, patreon.com/Christian Reeve. And that show is just me, just talking. And I'll pick various topics. Sometimes it'll be something that I'm just interested in, like a multiverse theory. Other times it will be, what it's like to work for an agency, and you get different types of shows with that. For the more personal ones like that, it's a bit different. I'm talking about my life. I'm sharing stories from my life. And for the episodes where it's about a topic, it's a bit more structured. It's a bit more about something unrelated to me. And I guess the thing maybe that shines through is my enthusiasm or passion for said thing. And I guess the thing that binds in all of these things together is I'm fascinated with life. I have a fascination with learning about life, with everything. And I know that sounds a bit all over the place. Like, what does that even mean? But it's true. You know, I love to learn. I love to grow. I love being able to document said things. I set myself a goal of getting to, I believe it's 2030. I started this podcast in 2020. And my thought process there was I'd love to just test myself. get to 10 years. How many people can say they've done a podcast for 10 years? I'm sure there's many people out there that have, but 10 years and maybe something meaningful. You'll notice that whenever I try to sell the podcast to new viewers, new listeners, what I'll often say is it's all about life lessons, life stories, life experiences, and everything in between. You go back and listen to the 200 plus episodes of this show, you'll get a wealth of information, of life stories, life lessons, things to live by, different perspectives, different ways of living life. But you'll definitely walk away inspired. And I guess this show is a series of segues, or my attempt at doing so as I try to kind of keep moving from topic to topic and make it seem like I really, plan this out when actually I'm just doing it on the fly. But when we talk about inspiration, that's certainly something I try to do. I try to get my out of my guests, and if it's just me, well, here we go. I'm trying my best. The first note I have here is learning from setbacks and using them to grow. Well, I've had quite a few setbacks in my life. And the one thing I want to focus on firstly, though, is how you interpret situations, how you choose to deal with situations. So it's all about attitude. I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't have moments where I'm unhappy about things, frustrated, angry, kind of having a fuck you mentality towards the world, but I don't sit and live in them. I did when I was younger, but I don't now. You know, I think the best thing always is to just embrace the emotion, let it out, and then get back to work, get back to doing what you do best. Don't sit in the corner and cry about it. Don't let that be your life. Let it be a small blip in your journey, but always allow yourself those emotions. I agree with that. Today I was supposed to do an interview, and it's 11:30 now. My guest nowhere to be seen. And I don't know what that means. I've had a lot of no shows over the years. It's pretty common if you do a podcast. Um, One thing I have learned, though, is not to get ahead of yourself. You never know what's happening. I've had people who've had medical emergencies, family matters, all this sort of stuff, and that's completely fine. I've had other people just completely ghost me and disappear into the abyss. I've had people randomly block me for no reason as we were about to do the show, and again disappeared off the face of the planet. And I've had a lot of people who I guess they just change their mind, go silent, decide I'm not worth their time. I don't know. That's not how I conduct myself. That's not how I do business. If I'm not available, I will tell you and I'll give you notice because I don't want to waste your time. But unfortunately, a lot of people will do that. They'll waste your time in life. And I think all you can do is just move on. You have to kind of try to take it in your stride, but it does get frustrating sometimes, especially when it's one of the reasons why I don't tell you guys what's coming up next because I don't want to, build up anticipation for a particular guest and then they let us all down. So I keep it a secret for that reason. Every now and again, I'll break that if I feel like it's definitely going to happen and, I want to let everyone in on it. I would normally because I love audience participation. I love you guys kind of becoming a part of that. It's our show, you know. But yeah, and here's the thing: I get disappointed too. I mean, it causes problems for me because I have to then either find a replacement guest or do a show like this where I try to make something interesting for an hour, which is subjective. I've always felt like these episodes are not as interesting, where it's just me talking. I let you be the judge of that. But it is frustrating sometimes, particularly when I'm really busy and I'm working a lot and maybe I don't have a lot of time and I was banking on this particular podcast. happening and then it falls through for whatever reason. And then now I've got to come up with something. And there's been times when I've had like maybe a week off, a few weeks off. It's rare over the last 4 years, but it has happened. And I try to make it up by having a few shows, back to back or something. We did that recently. Or just trying to kind of find some time to plan something out. Because I feel like you can't approach this half-assed. You can't just be like, oh, that'll do. Like I'll never put out a show and be like, that'll do. I need to sit down and do something that I'm proud of. I mean, I remember years ago, maybe a year into the podcast, I recorded a podcast for an hour and I sat back and listened to it and I was like, this is unacceptable. And I deleted it. That's an hour of me talking, an hour that I'll never get back, but an hour that I didn't want to subjugate people to because I didn't feel it was good enough for you guys. And I feel like that kind of attitude is important to have with everything that you do, to be passionate, to hold yourself to a high standard and not break from that standard. I've seen it a lot with like really successful content creators over the years. They get lazy, they've made their money now, who cares? And it's like, well, the thing that's at least always kind of stood out for me is to keep these to keep that attitude, to uphold that attitude, because it's all about the passion. It's all about the work. That's why we started. Like, I don't pursue my dreams because I'm looking to just get loads and loads of money and just sit on a pile of gold the rest of my life. Like, if I become successful, great. But I'll still be working. I'll still be building. And whatever happens, if I get more money, for example, if I had more access to other things, for me, it would be okay, I can build more. I can do bigger and better things. I've spoken about dreams of like doing travel shows. Wouldn't that be cool? Traveling the world and documenting things and giving my perspective on it, or doing bigger and better podcasts, having a physical studio, like I mentioned earlier, like all these big dreams I have, things I would do. That's what I would do with the money if I were to become successful in some way. Um, it's always about doing bigger and better things and influencing people. And I think this is one thing that I have lost sight of. And I sometimes, when I'm really struggling, like I have been lately, I do lose sight of it. And I am apologetic for it. I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had. And I'm grateful, for instance, that I get the opportunity to do this. Sometimes I've been sad about the fact that it doesn't reach many people, but it does reach people. And that's the whole point. It reaches people. There are you. There are those of you. I can't speak English. There are people who listen to this show, who watch this show. I'm talking directly to you right now. You continually listen to the show. Maybe you listen to it every week. Maybe you come back and forth. Maybe you just watch the clips. In any case, thank you so much. I continue to do this show for you. I believe in it, and I believe in you. I think that, even if you've got a few people that care, that's huge. Making people care about what you do in life is so difficult, because you'll do things and your friends and family won't care. They might have a slight interest, but they're not really invested in what you do. And, I used to be bitter about stuff like that, but then I just realized it's just, they don't see the vision. They don't see it the way that you see it. They don't believe in it the way that you believe in it. They don't believe in you the way that you believe in you. And you just have to accept it. But for the people that do believe in you, that is powerful. That is huge. That's something to be focused on. It's so easy to ignore all of the really positive feedback and only pay attention to the one negative voice in the room. But then you have to ask yourself, why am I taking this so seriously? Why am I letting this have an impact on me or a hold over me? I think obviously that's very easy to answer. It's because of our insecurities, our hang-ups about certain things. It paralyzes us sometimes. It catches us, off guard on bad days. I mean, everyone's got insecurities, everyone's got hang-ups, but at the end of the day, we have to fight them. We have to try to overcome them, and we have to try to move past them and be better than we think we are. We can't let these things limit us. But we do. Christ, I mean, I've been doing this for years and I still get sad about the fact that things don't work out the way that I would like. Every time I approach things with the same level of enthusiasm, and every time I get disappointed. You hear about a lot of successful people that have that same story and eventually it worked out. And a lot of people have said this to me over the years. It'll work out one day when you least expect it. It's right around the corner, and so on and so forth. And I don't know. I don't know if it's going to work out. I hope it does. It'd be nice. But then, is that even really the point of it? I think when you really stop to take a look at your life, you have to think about like what's actually important to you, not the world, not your friends and family, not society. What's important to you? What will make you happy? When I look at my life and I'm really honest and candid with myself about what I want to be able to look back at my life and say, I did something. I did something meaningful, impactful. I did something maybe no one expected of me. Maybe something I didn't expect of myself. When I was a kid, I remember I had this feeling that I was going to do something big. I didn't know what it was. And then as I got older, I just kind of felt like, oh, maybe I'm just, you know, too much of a dreamer. I have my head in the clouds. If you know, you know. But the point is, there was always this like belief that lingered there that maybe, just maybe, I have something different to offer than the average person. And I lived it, I did like, I chased the dream for a while and it didn't work out. But I loved pursuing it. I loved how it made me feel being on a stage, performing, writing music, doing all these things. And it didn't work out. And I let people get in my ear and tell me to, get a real job and do the things you're supposed to do. So I did that. And, for a time, I found a bit of happiness. And then suddenly I got bored. I felt kind of trapped. And there were other reasons for that, but I have this need to be free, to feel free. There's something about being a creative, about being an artist, where you meet a lot of people like yourself who are like these kind of free spirits. And it sounds very like hippy dippy, right? But honestly, it is a certain way of living. It's stressful, it's scary sometimes, but when it's good, it's really good because you have this freedom. You don't have to answer to anyone. You don't have to beg and plead for a holiday or, oh, I need this time off to see my kids or this, that, and the other. Like, no one has this control over you. You have sole control over you. You control when you work and when you rest. You're in control. And maybe that's the biggest goal I'm trying to achieve is to have control. I might not have control over life, what happens to me, the elements, etc., but I have control over my efforts and what I decide to put out into the world, for better or worse. This choice, it carries through in everything you do, like the choice to be a decent person versus being a bad person. None of us are perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get it wrong. We're going to be egotistical, selfish, greedy, but we're also going to be loving, kind, compassionate. There's always a choice, always a choice. I could think of so many times when I've had an opportunity to help someone, but by helping that person, I would put myself at a disadvantage. And I remember I'd always get the same feeling, even to this day, where I'd be like, that's really going to inconvenience me. But then the bigger voice is like, this is the right thing to do. Just do it. Don't worry about the inconvenience. We'll figure that out. Just help this person. You're able to help them right now. Help them. And so I did. And every single time, I always felt a sense of happiness afterwards, a sense of kindness afterwards, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there's some hope in the world. There's faith in humanity. Allow me for a second to tell you a story, real quick. I'm 14, 15. I'm waiting for the bus to go to sixth form college. It's early in the morning. It's maybe 8 or 9 in the morning. And I'm waiting for this bus, and there's like a bus garage. So this bus is pulling up this side of the street, and other buses terminating the other side, waiting, resting to come round eventually. Small bit of road. And there's a man. It's quite a large man. I think he's homeless. And he's drunk. He's really, really drunk. And it's like a Monday morning, middle of the morning. And it's never good to see when you see someone in that sort of state, at that time of day, on that day, it's never great to see. You know something's not going right there. Something's wrong. And I see him walking towards the curb, and he trips over and he smashes his face on the curb. And it was pretty surreal because I'll never forget this as long as I live. For a second, I thought he was dead. I thought, oh my God, did I just witness a man die in front of me? And then a few seconds later, he moved his head upwards and there was blood gushing from his top lip. I think his nose or something. It was just bleeding all the way down. And I was kind of paralyzed in the moment. I knew I was going to help him, but I wanted to see if anyone else was going to come and help. Because I was a kid. I was like 14. And there was adults around. And I looked to my left and I remember seeing one guy in his 40s in a suit, a few other people around 30s, 40s. And then there was one kid who was like probably, maybe 13. And I looked at him and he looked back. And I looked back at this man. And I was like, right, I can't believe no one's going to help this man. Like I was confused, but I was like, someone has to do something. And so I ran over to him. And then this is where it gets kind of funny. So I didn't really plan this out. I kind of quickly realized, oh, I'm a tiny, scrawny teenager, and this is quite a large man. How the hell am I going to pick him up? And so I'm like trying to like I'm at the right hand side of this man, trying to lift him up and talk to him and be like, "Hey man, are you okay? Like let's try and get you up." And like he's not moving very well because he's really inebriated and it's not great. And then wouldn't you know it, who's the person that comes, runs over and helps? It's the other kid. So it's two kids, two scrawny little teenagers trying to pick up this man, and none of the adults did anything. I guess maybe in that moment they were just figured someone else might help. Or maybe they were just, too concerned about getting to work that day. I don't know. In my mind, in that moment, I was not worried about getting the bus or being late for sixth form. I was worried about this man that just fell over in front of me and was bleeding. This human being that needed help. So we picked him up, sat him down on the bus seats, those awful little small red seats. I don't know how, but just on a side note, like, I don't know why they designed them that way. Like, they're really uncomfortable. you can't really properly sit. You have to kind of do this weird like upper back leaning thing. And they're just tiny and they're really cold in the winter. Anyway, we sat him down on that. Eventually, someone comes over, and the crazy thing about it, I've told this story before, but like it's just, it still gets me to this day. I was the one in charge of this situation, and I was a kid. An adult came and ran over to me, 30s, 40s, and is asking me what we should do. I was just like, go and get someone from the train station nearby, because it was like 2 minutes away or a minute away, not even that. Like, get someone from the train station to help us. Like, what do you mean? Call an ambulance? I don't know. Like, why am I in charge of this situation? But I was. And I stepped up and I took charge of it. And we fixed it and we got him help and everything and it was sorted out. And I looked at the situation as it was. I got on with my day. We left him there and we got our buses and then we didn't think anything of it. And that's often the way I leave those situations is thinking we helped someone today. That's good. And you move on. But I feel like so many of us just don't appreciate the impact of kindness, the how these small acts of compassion can change the world that we live in. If nothing else, they set an example. It's not about just being a good person or, walking around and being the good Samaritan. That's besides the point. It's about improving this world that we live in. You know, acts of kindness, acts of good. It can be everything from just like keeping your rubbish with you and choosing to put it in the bin versus just dropping it on the floor. It can be trying to be more environmentally conscious. It can be, you're working and you're trying to look after your staff and make sure they're fed and watered and taken care of, and defending them when people try to abuse them and stuff. It's spending some time with your buddy in the pub because he's going through a really rough time and you've got a few hours before you go to work. So you sit down with him and you have a chat and you make sure that he's all right. Like, there's so much you can do to help others. And often all it involves is just a bit of your time, bit of your time. Sometimes it's more than that. I understand like if you're being there for someone, you got to show empathy and stuff. It can take a lot out of you, but that person's going to remember that forever. And if they're a good friend, they'll have your back. They'll be there for you when you need them. I just think there's a lot to be said for when we focus more on helping each other rather than just helping ourselves. Sure, we stand to benefit more, I suppose, from only helping ourselves. But to be honest, the one thing I've learned about being kind and helping others is that you get this sense of happiness that you can't really draw from anything else. It's like a warm sensation. You know it's good, you know it's right. It's infectious. And I wonder sometimes why we don't strive to get that sometimes, get more of that in life. Why we don't strive to create a world where that's the norm and that's what people look for in every single day rather than just chasing money, chasing status, all these things. It's something that frustrates me about the world we live in. And, I had a bit of a rant the other day about this because I was just so frustrated. Um, I'm so sick of the numbers. I'm so sick of everything being about numbers. Like when I talk about this podcast sometimes and I mention it to people, I mention that I'm doing a podcast and people, go, oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like everyone does a podcast. And it's like, I mention how many episodes I've done. And I notice people's reactions to that. It's often like, oh, wow, and then you get two camps. You get people that are impressed and ask more about the podcast. They want to know more. Maybe they even want to check it out. And then you got the other camp, the one that I'm referring to, where It's all, oh, how many streams you got? How many followers do you got? You know, it's always that. It's only impressive if you're reaching a certain amount of people. It's only impressive if you're a big celebrity, big star. It's never impressive if you're just trying to do something meaningful. And why? Why not? Why shouldn't that be what's actually valuable? Why is it always just about status and money and followers and all this fucking bullshit? I'm tired of it. I'm mentally and physically just worn out by it all. I'm tired of that being the measuring stick. And to be honest, like I kind of refuse it as well. I'll say this now, touch wood, that this doesn't happen. But let's say it does. Let's say I do this show till 2030 and it never picks up more than, 20 followers and listeners. Well, do you know what? That in my mind is something. 20 people checked out the show and got something, and maybe were inspired to do bigger and better things as a result. I often think about sometimes in life where you listened to a particular thing or watched a particular thing and it changed everything in your life. You think about particular movies or albums or videos that you saw, and you just, it changed everything for you. You never saw life again the same way after having consumed that piece of media or having had that experience. And that's often how I look at these things that I do. I've been called intense. I've been called dramatic. I've been told I'm over the top, too sensitive, whatever. But you know what? At least I'm real. At least I give you something genuine rather than putting on a facade, rather than only caring about the numbers and the follow accounts and all the other bullshit. I'll give you something real. I'll give you something you can take away and think about. Because if nothing else, isn't that worth something? Something that gets you thinking, gets you questioning life, questioning yourself, questioning your own existence. Maybe you're listening to this and you're stuck in a bit of a rut. Every day feels the same. You're kind of sick of it. Maybe you've not even noticed it. And then you listen to this and suddenly you're like, oh, maybe I need to change something. Try something different. There's nothing wrong with having a life that looks the same every day. If you're happy, you're happy. But what I pose to you is this. Are you realizing your true potential? Sit and think about this for a moment. Are you realizing your true potential? Right now, is this everything that you can achieve? If you're really honest with yourself, are you doing everything that you can? Is this the best that you can do? Or could you do more? Could you be more? You really sit and think about it. I'd wager you probably could. But you got to be honest with yourself. You got to be true to yourself. You got to realize your potential and then pursue that potential. That, in essence, is what it means to get the most out of life when we're talking about an individual. Doesn't matter what anyone else is saying. Doesn't even matter what your inner voice is telling you. You can't play it safe. You got to go out there and just try. And I guarantee you this, if nothing else, you will get something out of it. I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know if I'm ever going to be successful, but I can tell you this, pursuing my dreams has made me more confident. It's made me realize that I should be more bold in life and to kind of to not listen to that voice that's like scared all the time that goes, oh, what if this happens? Oh, what if this goes badly? Da, 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 da. I couldn't care less about that voice because how has that voice ever served me? How has that voice ever helped me? It hasn't. It's just an annoying little fly in the that you swat away. You're like, whatever. Like, give me something useful. Give me something I can use. Give me something inspirational. Something I can take away and be like, yeah, I'm gonna do something special. I'm gonna change something. When I look back at my life, I look at what I've done so far. I feel like I could hang my hat on it. I feel like I've barely touched the ice. I was going to say tip the iceberg, touched the iceberg of potential. But there's so much there that I've done already, and so much of it came from just kind of going, screw it, let's just try, let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. You know, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as just taking a different route home from work or something. Like, oh, I've never been here before. Let's see what I discover. Or, let's go out on that date. Let's see if there's something there. Let's apply for that job. Let's see what that happens. Like, here's a good one with jobs. Like, sometimes I'll look at something and there'll be something glaringly obvious in that I don't have or that they've said I need. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just apply anyway. Let's see what happens. Maybe they'll be like, maybe they'll get in contact with me and we can work something out, or they'll just be intrigued as to why I applied. Like, ooh, like I feel like so much of it is just like rolling a dice and just seeing what happens. It might not lead anywhere, but I feel like a lot of the time you'll learn something about yourself that you hadn't planned on learning. And that is a big thing that I've learned over the years is that to just try, to just see what could happen, for better or worse. And I feel like you always get something out of it. If it's a failure, then you learn something. You either learn to not do it again, or maybe it's the wrong timing. Maybe you didn't have all the resources at play, whatever, right? Or if it did go well, it's like, oh, this is something we can build on. You still probably learn something. Maybe you discover something new that you never knew you could do. I guess in a way it's kind of like gambling on yourself, but I think everyone should gamble on themselves. I mean, if you really think about it, it's the best thing to do because you know yourself better than anyone else. If you're gambling on someone else, you don't know all the variables. You're not inside their head, but you are inside your head 24/7. You know how you think, how you feel, how you interact with the world, what you want. You know, you can't lie to yourself. You can try to lie to yourself, but you can't. And when you start to like embrace and let go a little bit and just kind of accept what's happening and do your best to influence things and just kind of let things be, amazing things can happen. But at the same time, we have to be patient. And Christ, I have to remind myself this of all the time. You know, I preach about being patient. I preach about all these things, but I'm just as bad for it because we're emotional beings. We're human. You know, we want things now. We want it now. I want success now. I don't want to wait for success. I feel like I've already worked hard enough for success. But then whenever I get frustrated and I think about the fact that I've not gotten what I want yet, and then I think about the prospect of doing more work to get it, and then I think about, oh, can I be bothered to do this? The same thought always comes into my mind. If you're not prepared to put the work in, you don't deserve it. How much do you want this? If you want this enough, you'll give everything you have to get it. It's not good enough to turn around and be like, today I don't feel like trying. No, every day you have to try. Every day you have to give it 100%. Some days you're not going to feel as strong as you did the day before, but you give what you have on that day. You give what you have, and that will be good enough. It might not always lead somewhere, but just know that you're doing the best that you can do. And that's what matters above all else. I think the final thing I'd like to talk about here is self belief. Well, the power of self belief. Thank you, Vilma. You rock. Kind of says it all, really, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know what else to say. When you just hear it, it seems pretty straightforward. Power of self belief. The power that is self belief. When I was growing up and I was insecure, I had people around me say things like, "Oh, you'll never learn to play guitar properly," or "You're tone deaf, you can't sing," or "You're just not right for this," blah 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 blah. And, if you hear enough of that, you'll start believing that. And the crazy thing is, you'll put up barriers, boundaries, blockades because of what other people have said. And that, don't get me wrong, I'm not having a go at people here. Like, I get it. It's just when you sit and think about it, it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? You don't do things because someone else said that you can't do it. But let's just review that for a second. Let's say people here didn't do something because someone else said that you didn't have what it takes. Did you ever try? Just in general, did you ever just kind of turn around and go, you know what? I know they said I can't do it, but I'll just try anyway. I'll just see what happens. And then did you surprise yourself? Did you go, oh, actually, I can do this? Or actually, with a little bit more practice, I could master this? Or if I just try a little bit more, I could do this, or etc., etc. It's rare that you'll ever do something for the first time and nail it. You'll probably suck, which is the whole point. Everyone sucks the first time. Everyone is rubbish on the first attempt. And that's just the way it is. Of course you're gonna suck. Of course you're gonna be rubbish. You've never done it before. You have to learn to do it. And then you keep doing it, and then you get better at it. And before you know it, you can do it with your eyes shut. But there's got to be that leap of faith. And that comes from self belief. That comes from this ability to believe that I can do it. I think the misconception here a lot of the time is this belief that you have to be this really strong person. You have to be a built different, a cut above the rest, all that rubbish. No. If I seem strong to you, if I seem like I've got a lot of self belief, you'd be wrong. A lot of the time, I just kind of just say, fuck it. Let's, like what I said earlier, let's see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? Oh, it doesn't work out. Well, tell me something I don't know. Tell me something I haven't seen before. I just think it's worth trying. I think it's always worth trying because you never know. Maybe this is the time it's going to happen. Maybe you're going to meet someone influential this time. Me being confident and pursuing my dreams led to me meeting my now girlfriend. That never would have happened if I'd have been the person I was before. And I think about that a lot. This person that you are, this person that you could be. Realizing your dreams, I think a lot of the time comes down to just your mindset, improving your mindset, changing your mindset. That's the key in all of this. If you can change your mindset, you'll change your life. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Christian Reeve podcast. Please let me know what you'd like to see or hear in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.